Okay, so I never have this happen. So this is Amber MacArthur. I never have this happen, but because Amber's such a pro and has been doing media since, I don't know, they were typing media. I never have like real pro people who have multi-camera shot studios and that sort of a thing. So I continue to be like slightly goggle-eyed at all the things that you did in to be prepped. I want that to be a starting point, Amber, because I am fascinated by, starting way back at like CBC and G4 TV Tech and all those sorts of things. You've got a setup now. How long till you got this? How long, have you had this setup going? And how long before you kind of got this set up the way you wanted it to be?
Okay, so I am definitely going to date myself with giving you that timeline, but I went to journalism school, did a master's in journalism, and then worked for CBC, which is a big national broadcaster in Canada. And then 20 years later, now we have a studio, and Chris, who is my husband, but also my partner in our business, Amber Mac Media, is a total geek when it comes to all of this production technology. So I would say for the past 12, 13 years, we've been experimenting in terms of doing our own media. We both come from broadcast television, but we're frustrated with that experience and felt as though there were more opportunities outside of the confines of the newsroom. And we started our own business, and here we are today. So it's really good to chat with you. I'm actually going to share this broadcast so we can chit chat with more people too.
Yeah, why not? This probably break everything, I'm sure, but we'll see how it goes. Southern Nevada, so you don't even say Vegas anymore, Dad. Hi, good to see you. Carrie, my longtime friend and collaborator, also known as Carrie in the comments here, says, hi, check out your website. And there's my mom. So anyway, I wanted to tell the story of how we first met because it was so funny in person, I should say. It was so funny because of the scene that was set and how like it was just kind of like a weird heroic triumph moment. And your husband, Chris, will appreciate it too. So you might notice that Amber has a certain energy about her, and she talks to geeks and nerds who are not the socially smartest and best at like connecting with real people in person. Sometimes it takes them a little bit of work. By the way, I'm gonna stop my own story because I totally want to tell that story, but I'm gonna do something. I'm gonna pull me off screen. Chris, will you run through like some of your video shots? I'm gonna make Amber the star for a second.
All right, so this is our side shot here. This is kind of a wide shot on the slider that we have in studio. And this is a separate studio, so this is not our house, but our business studio. It's a beautiful loft in downtown Toronto in the old Wrigley loft. So they used to make gum here. So some wonderful history to this building, some great windows that you can see here. So we looked at a bunch of spaces, Chris, and we saw a lot of studios that were pretty generic, a typical photo studio with a white background, which is beautiful. But this one, we walked in here and we just felt as though this kind of spoke to us as just having a really cool look to it as well.
So it's amazing to see that. So you have to understand that gazillions of people know Amber Mac. She shows up at PodCamp Toronto, February 2007, Ryerson, at whatever that super techie building is. And I don't know her very well, but I know who she is. And I wander into a throng of little teen boys, like who cannot not stop talking to her. Like, oh, la, la, oh, la, 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 look at me, look at me. By relation to the speech I was going to give, I had a t-shirt on that said free hugs. So Amber sees me, wanders through all of those children and gives me a hug. And I look right over her shoulder at all those boys. And I'm like, that's right, bitches.
Oh my gosh.
And it was so like unfounded and unfair and whatever. But I walked like that for a bit. But it was fun because especially in the early days of podcasting and all that sort of a thing, it was so easy to reach the top talent in the world like Amber and have her just show up and be amongst all the plebs as well. And it was a perfect way. And I know that's not how you look at it. I'm putting words in your mouth, but I want you to talk for a minute about what it's been like over the span of media. Like you said, you and Chris were in broadcast TV where you don't get feedback except for negative comments a lot time later or something. What's it been like since the new media revolution and what kind of brought you to where you are?
I feel like the new media revolution took longer than any of us imagined. I should say that to start out, because when Chris and I left broadcast media in about 2006, 2007, to be fair, I was actually not really considered a real reporter in the newsroom where I worked. So I was kind of shoved to the side because I covered technology. I was into Twitter and all the new social platforms. No one really cared about that. So I was like this kind of weird person in the newsroom who didn't really fit in. So it was an unpleasant experience for me in many ways because I just didn't feel as though I was part of that team because technology wasn't taken seriously at that time. So Chris and I stepped away. We started doing more in the video podcasting space. We started doing more eventually in streaming video. And I think what we're seeing now in 2020 is that we've finally seen that the digital space is taken more seriously. I would argue that a lot of mainstream media people are also keen to get their foot in the door in this space. But it's been a longer process than I thought. I thought we'd step away in that time in 2007. And then almost overnight, people would be flocking to the internet. But I've seen that it's definitely taken a longer period than any of us imagine. You know, people come to me now and ask me to do podcasts, and they describe what podcasts are like they just came out in 2019. So there's some of that too.
That's killing me. So when you say that, I want to dig back in on I was the sort of fish out of water in the newsroom. Were you the person who got sent to things like, you know, the poutine eating contest and those sorts of things? That was the beat they'd give you, or did they at least let you do tech?
Yeah, so I was the technology reporter. I was called a new media specialist. So I was hired to cover technology, but I wasn't allowed to sit with the real reporters. They put me with the people on the web team, which quite frankly, I loved because they were all nerds. Some of the real reporters would walk by and be like, oh, how are you and your geek friends, and sort of dismiss us. It was that attitude. And most often the producers wanted me to cover something that was really salacious that was going on in the internet space, always about, oh, there's a story about a child predator. You know, that's how they saw the internet at that time. So I was there for about 14 months and did lots of great stories, but it definitely wasn't a good fit for me because my version of the internet and community was very different than what they saw. And at the end of the day, I think they just weren't ready. I mean, I think 10 years later, it's a whole different world.
It really is. And yet I find that they still tend to sometimes treat this as fun shenanigans. We were having a little pre-conversation with husband, Chris, and me, and we were talking about gaming and stuff. And the fact that, you know, it's amazing how much those people have figured out. I love the story of some podcaster explaining a podcast to you. That's going to be in my head for the whole rest of the interview.
Yeah, it's you know, they started an audio podcast in 2019, so they'll describe how it's distributed. And then I want to tell them that podcasting isn't new. It's been around for many, many years. You know, we used to do Command N, which was a video podcast. I did lots of podcasts with Leo Laporte. So it's definitely a medium that's been around for a long time. But to be fair to some people, they think that it's brand new, and that's just their exposure to it. It's only been as of late.
It's kind of nuts. You have always had more than one iron in the fire. You've always had sort of more than one show. Well, I say always. Two-ish forward you have. You're doing a show on AI, or were.
Yeah.
You've got all these things going. What's your lineup? What's the Amber Mac library right now?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I will say that I grew up in rural Prince Edward Island. I lived out in the country. We didn't have a ton of money in terms of lots of resources at our fingertips. So I think I've been one of those people who's always felt as though multiple streams of revenue makes the most sense, because I've always been terrified to go back to a time where I felt as though it was going to be a struggle. And so for me right now, there are a bunch of different avenues that we're pursuing in terms of the business. We have our studio here. We do lots of live streaming. I recently wrapped a podcast series that you mentioned called The AI Effect, which was presented by Accenture. That won a couple of awards, so it was really well received. It was all about demystifying AI. I do 50 keynotes a year with an agency, and now many of those, of course, are now virtual. And I do some brand partnerships as well.
Well, if only you had a studio to shoot your virtual keynotes so that it would be a little more than just the old standard cam with a background wall. Amazing. So yeah, I had a suspicion that the AI thing had wrapped because I couldn't find what I was looking for about it. And I was like, oh, well, I'll just ask her in that way that leaves it vague enough that I pretend I did my homework. But you know, the concept of creating really good and useful content and helping a brand that way and selling with content marketing, it's been really hard for some companies to get behind. Again, it's still in 2020, they're still like, what is this mystery? How do you end up pitching it? Or at this point, you just show them some of your reel and say, this is what we do.
I think a lot of people don't realize that in many cases, you have to put in months, if not years, of really hard work to build a community online. It doesn't happen overnight. That's probably the biggest misconception, is people believe that they can just start and then people will come. I mean, that's been a problem, as we know, for many, many years in this space, that marketers think that they can just build community and they don't have to put in the time or effort. So I would say, for the most part right now, when a company comes to us and they want to build something in the social space, that we tend to pitch them on things that we know will generate high engagement, even if they don't have a massive audience. I would argue that live streaming on Facebook is a great example of that. I think we all know the stats as far as the engagement with live content versus static content is quite high. So that's a place that we often start, and we have lots of expertise in that area. So live streaming has been a great niche for us, I think, with some of these brands or publishers that want to try content in this space, because they can immediately get feedback from an audience and build an audience relatively quickly.
Well, and then once you get all those, as Steve Garfield points out, you can always make a viral video. Can't you do that for your client?
I've never had a viral video. I also don't use YouTube, which is kind of funny, because I'm often described as a YouTuber because I do so much video content. If you went to my YouTube channel, there's nothing there. So I think also people have this misconception that you can't succeed in this space if you're not on YouTube. And I will say that YouTube's not for everyone. I mean, we all know this. It's a certain audience, and you don't have to be there, but you do need to be places where your audience is and where there's value in that relationship.
I have a yucky question, but it's one that people have to consider and think about. Speaking about not using YouTube, everyone goes, yeah, YouTube's great if you obliterate the comments. It's kind of hard to be a lady in video. It's tricky. How have you managed that your whole career? Because I'm sure it's got to have changed from the early days of fight, and everything else you have to do. And I'm sure there's amazing horror stories, but how have you managed it?
Well, I think that it's one thing to be a woman in video, and then you can layer on being a woman in tech, and that just creates a whole
also true
problem. So I think being a woman who's doing video content, I think there are challenges there. I think the technology piece is also another challenge, I think, that I've experienced. Although I will say that after so many years, I feel as though I have this amazing community around me. And so it's definitely a much more pleasant experience. I shared a story the other day, which I've never really shared before, but when I was at G4 Tech TV with Leo Laporte, probably 6 months to a year into my job, where I was fighting to get, equal time on air, to have my own set versus just sitting in a chair answering phones. I had someone on my own team. He was actually in charge of the lighting, who wrote almost a manifesto to the producers at the station saying that I had no business being on air. I didn't know what I was talking about. I was nervous. I was like a deer in the headlight. He said all these terrible things about me and that I should not have that job, despite the fact that, let me be very clear, I stayed up till, midnight, 1, 2 in the morning, almost every night, reading technology manuals, because I knew if I screwed up on a daily 1-hour tech show and said one thing that was wrong, my career was over. And so it was challenging to have people who were even part of your own team not really believe in you. And it probably took about a decade before I felt as though people were finally able to take a deep breath and say, you know what, we can trust a woman who's giving us technology advice. It's no longer bruising our egos.
Can you even imagine? Well, it doesn't hurt to marry your tech team. Then,
Yes, exactly. When I was younger, my parents never said you should marry a cameraman, but who's laughing now, Chris?
This is the best. This is truly the best. Yeah, Carol, hearing this story, says this is making my blood boil. Carol's down in Montreal, just the sister city to Toronto, really. But she's saying that is that where you're based now? Where's the base of operations right now?
Yeah, so we are in downtown Toronto, and mostly here, although I've been traveling for years all over the place. And I'm originally from Prince Edward Island, like I mentioned, and we have a home in South Florida as well. So not that we're getting to any of those places, but we definitely move around quite a bit.
Wow, PEI. So do you break out your Green Gables costumes at certain times of the year and that sort of thing?
Well, this is probably a story for Carol, because if you think about Anne of Green Gables, and if you know the story really well, the story of Anne, she was quite a spunky character who really didn't put up with any crap from anyone, particularly some of the boys around here. So growing up, I mean, that was a role model for me. Obviously, there were no women in technology doing broadcasting. So I had this amazing story from the place where I'm from of this girl who just would not put up with any crap. And that was really, I think, something that inspired me at a young age, knowing that, hey, you don't have to just, do what your parents expect you to do. You don't always have to say yes. You can kind of go out there and carve your own path. So a good story for Carol.
All I'm adding to that is that Megan follows. I certainly pined from her from here in the States, and I would like try to tell my friends about this. I'd be like, "Have you seen Anne of Green Gables?" And they're like, "No." And that was when it was not especially socially acceptable to have a very non-masculine pursuit, like watching a lot of episodes of Anne of Green Gables. But I would say to him, "But she's an attractive female actor." And so that's the extent of. I went to PEI and did everything that every American does at PEI, and like looked at that sort of stuff. And
yeah, it's a beautiful place.
Oh, it's gorgeous. It's got to be a strange place, though. The small world aspect of growing up in a place like that. I mean, I grew up in Maine, so it's Maine's like Canada's pants. So I feel like people who come from that kind of a place versus being born and raised in like downtown Toronto, you get a very provincial view of the earth before you get big. Does that influence how you bring your message to all of the places? You don't ever seem to report like a city girl, quote unquote. You
Sure.
report like someone who's talking to a very specific person. How do you bring that voice to whom you speak?
So I think it does give you a unique perspective when you grow up in a rural area, especially a place like PEI. When I grew up there, there was no bridge to the mainland. I definitely had a kind of a pretty simple life as a young kid in elementary school. So I think there are a couple of things. One, I believe that we were in the richest place in the world. We had tons of land. We had this big farmhouse. I thought, I live in the lap of luxury. I remember my first time flying to Los Angeles, and all the houses were so close together in the Hollywood Hills. I was like, oh, these poor people, they have no land. And so I think at the end of the day, it kind of, twists your perspective, because one, you grow up in a place where it's very simple, very easy. And then secondly, I think another thing that happened to me while I was growing up there is I always worked in our family business. So I worked at a very young age. And I think that work ethic is something that has really paid off over the years. I was never afraid of work. And that's helped me during this time. And I also didn't kind of put myself in a box, because I wasn't expected to do much more than maybe get married and have some kids, and that was it. So I've never felt that pressure to do anything beyond that. And everything has been just the fact that I really love creating content, and I love working. And I know you're not supposed to say that now. I think you're not supposed to say that you enjoy hustling and working.
Yeah, it's not supposed to be cool.
It's not cool to say that now, but nonetheless, I'm saying it anyway.
I mean, when did you ever follow the cool trend? I mean, that's another kind of a vanguard about all, or hallmark of all the stuff you've ever done. I mean, you have to cover the popular things, but it's not like you ever dove towards cool stuff. What makes, I mean, the obvious answer will be, whatever gets the most views and the most attention on the thing I'm trying to promote or whatever, and also whatever the client needs. But what makes you choose a story for you? What makes you pursue a story?
I tend to, first of all, I love interviewing people. So if there's anything that I am drawn towards, it's interviewing people, particularly people building technology, whether it's software, services, apps, whatever it might be, in the really early stages. I love that feeling. I mean, Leo and I did a lot of that in the early days of Net at Night on Twit, the founders of YouTube and Twitter. So what draws me toward that is just people who have big dreams, and you can kind of sense that they just have this focus and this passion and this drive, and you just know they're going to be able to accomplish something just by meeting them or talking to them. So to me, a story is really much more about people than the story itself. And I've always been drawn to those people where I felt, hey, I don't know what this person's going to do. And I don't know if it's going to work or be successful. Maybe they're going to fail a few times, but I just know that they're not going to give up, and we're going to see them for many years to come. And I think that it's kind of like a spidey sense that maybe some of us have in the technology industry, where we just know kind of what it takes to be in this space. It's much more, I think, about community and building and being able to create technology that really has value. And if you're able to identify that early on in a company, those are the stories that I love. Chris, I think I lost you. Sorry.
I'm a goof. Thank you. See, because I don't have a Chris.
I was like, is this working when I tap my ear?
Yeah, no, instead I get text messages, you idiot, you're muted. So I'll try it again. I'm going to try something I've never done, which is bring a third person on, which is Carrie Gorgan, who I always joke is Carrie in the comments. But she runs a whole lot of content stuff over at Marketing Profs and whatnot. And she's filling the whole comment section with all these facts about you. And, you know, that you started with your family business at age 8 and all that, and hosts her own shows. I knew she'd probably have a question or two, so I thought it'd be kind of fun to drag her.
Awesome.
So this is Carrie Gorgan. Hi, Carrie. Oops, I got to move something off of Amber's head because
I like that. Hi, Carrie.
Hi. Thanks for being here. You went to school in a 2-room schoolhouse. You mentioned you were from a really rural area. Do you think that shaped you and your career later on?
I think it did. You know, I talked about some of those things that I felt have been advantageous in terms of being from a small town. Honestly, I think one of the things that was probably the most unique about going to a 2-room schoolhouse where you kind of had grade 1 in one row and grade 2 in another row is that you had to be really creative during that time. I spent a lot of time alone as a child in this big house in the country. And I felt as though, you know, obviously we had no internet, no technology in our lives. So you really had to have a big imagination. And so for me, I think that has helped a lot in this business. You know, if something isn't working in our business, then I am probably the first person to say, okay, let's pivot and go in this direction. I've never been scared of new ideas. And that is probably because, one, I don't have this long legacy to keep up with. You know, I've met many people who have decades and generations of wealth, and they feel this pressure to continue to do that. I'm on the up and up, you know, compared to where I'm from right now. So there is no real failing at this point. So yes, I think it's definitely helped contribute to where I'm at today and what we've been able to build at the company as well.
How do you explain to your parents what you do? Like, how did you explain it to everybody at home?
Well, it's a really good question. And I think one of the cool things that people maybe don't know is that my dad is very involved in our business. So he does all of our new business contracts and agreements. My mom somewhat as well. So they really understand the business, I think, from the inside out. And so that has been helpful for us, even though my dad retired and had a successful career. Now he's working 40, 50 hours a week in our business. So it's kind of a role reversal in some ways.
Do you hug everybody that wears a Free Hugs t-shirt? I think everybody wants to know this.
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, I definitely will say that I am a bit of a hugger, and I hug people when it's probably not appropriate to hug them. So that's also been something new that's happened, I think, in the world over the past few years, is that you're really not supposed to touch people and hug them. And I've had to kind of step back my hugging a bit.
I'm going to make a note of that. Inappropriate hugger.
Yeah, exactly. Don't come after me, internet.
No. But I think being scrappy and being hungry, like from an early age, has to help when you're trying to make it as a woman in the tech space.
Yeah, you know, I have to say that my first job, and you kind of alluded to it, at 8 years old, my parents owned a property management business where they were managing these shopping malls, so these outdoor shopping malls in Charlottetown, not very big. My dad decided, instead of hiring a garbage company to pick up the garbage, that my brother and I would go before school and we could pick up the garbage with him in our pickup truck. And so before we even went to school, we were picking up garbage in the freezing cold. And I hate to say this because my brother will never agree with this, but I loved it. I felt so competitive. I wanted to pick up as much garbage as possible. I was very focused, and I felt very satisfied after doing that job. And it was a weird thing, and I still feel like that today. I love working. I don't know. I think it depends if you like what you do, but also I feel like I would like lots of different things. I feel a lot of gratitude to be healthy and to be able to work. So I never have had a day where I've thought, oh God, I don't want to do this. Right? It's a fun space to be in.
You're a parent. Do you put the kid to work? And then I'll shut up and let Chris talk.
It's true. You know, we have an 11-year-old and he's done lots of stuff in our business as well. So I think I've just always been drawn towards that family business. It's something that I think a lot of people are comfortable with that. And when you're growing a small business, finding people who you can really trust is essential. And so our son, although he's not picking up garbage, he's definitely pretty savvy about creating video content.
No, my kids are shifty. That won't work for me, but thanks.
Yeah. Well, Carrie Gorgan, everyone, thanks so much, Carrie, always to be here. So glad you were just willing to jump right in like that, you know, but that's who you are.
Thanks for letting me hijack it.
Awesome, Woo! Carrie. Nice to meet you.
So yeah, that worked. I was so surprised. I think you could have up to 6 on this. You were asking questions.
I like how they pulled her in and it just kind of slid over.
Right. Make room. We got another
Yeah,
seat here.
I
It's
like
like the
it.
Johnny Carson couch. That's dating yourself when you call it Johnny Carson's couch. It'll never be Jimmy Fallon's couch, Steve Garfield notwithstanding. I guess that's a segue. I have the worst segues I've learned. I have the absolute worst segues in the entire world. But what from the old fun days still exists for you? And what from the new days is less fun? Two different questions.
Yeah. So do you mean specifically around technology?
I do, but technology, but how Amber Mac does Amber Mac's job.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's fun to work with the fam. What's like the old geekery that's still kind of exciting to you as far as making these things get together versus what's new that you just can't muster energy or excitement around?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really great question. So I think if I had to go with what is old that I still appreciate, I would probably say Twitter. I know this is kind of a cop out, but there's lots of things I love about Twitter. I know people want to beat up on that platform, but to me, there's still things about Twitter that I do love, and I think it's become essential in so many different ways for many people. And that's been a platform for me that I probably would call it my number one platform. I think what's new that I definitely don't really have time for is probably TikTok. I know everybody's like, oh, marketers need to be on TikTok.
That's all we wanted you to say, Amber.
Yeah, I'm not, you know what? Sure, maybe they do if they want to speak to my son who's 11, but they're not hiring me for keynote, so I don't want to be on TikTok.
I'm with you there. No, the new question was kind of baiting to see if you were going to say TikTok. The old days I was just randomly curious about, but yeah, Carol, who we talked to earlier from Montreal, she and her daughter Lila do some pretty interesting TikTok dances, and I'm down for watching those. But beyond that, I pretty much have no particular need to be on that platform. I also chose not to be on Snap for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, it was just that same sort of feeling, just like, I don't need to be on this one. It is interesting. We were talking about gaming. We were talking about Twitch TV and all that sort of a thing. Does your son watch a lot of gamer streams, or do you guys watch gamer streams, or what's that about?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, my son is 11 years old, and I will say that he's never been a hardcore gamer at all until the past couple of months when he's gone into virtual school, and apparently he's had a lot more time. So he's gotten much more into gaming over the past couple of months. So he's playing a lot of Fortnite, which we had actually banned in our house at one point, and then clearly I've given up over the past couple of months because I don't know what I can tell him to do. He can't be with children. So at the end of the day, it gets very difficult. So our house, I think, has become an accidental gaming house over the past couple of months. And yeah, he watches a lot of gaming, streaming content from some of his favorite gamers. And, for the most part, I'm okay with it. I mean, I think for people watching right now, for all parents, the past couple of months has been difficult in terms of saying to kids, oh, you too much time on your screens, but you can't go out and be with your friends. I mean, it's a challenging and quite unique time for sure.
I want to double down on that because I feel like I'm one of the few parents out there saying, let your freaking kids get lots of screen time right now because it's also their social setting. My kids and I game almost always as a part of being social. My oldest now, lives with his mom. We game and we talk all the time when we game. When he's in front of me, nothing. Yeah. He's like a very typical 18. So I feel that. On the other hand, the other thing I always try to explain is, of course, everything needs, a break. We grown-ups need to walk away from our screens. But I feel that one other thing that this has taught a lot of people is maybe that they're not ready for this remote work life the way they think they are. And balance and all that just really didn't work. Are you finding your friends and also colleagues and whatnot who don't have the same work lifestyle that you do suddenly a little bit fish out of water?
I think that's fair to say. I mean, I think for many people like us who have done their own thing for so many years, I mean, I'm used to working from home. My son has known since he was, a toddler, almost like mommy's on a conference call in the kitchen. Don't bother her. I'm doing a live stream, be quiet for a minute. He understands that environment. But I think you're right for those people who come from more traditional jobs where perhaps they've been in an office 9 to 5 and then commuted back and forth. And now everybody's under the same roof. There's a lot of learning to do as far as how that's going to work. And I think for some people, it's just not going to work. I mean, I think some people see the office as a place where they can go and get away and they can socialize. I'm not saying that I'm not social, but I love my home and I love my little family. And I relish that time. And so for me, I feel like I've never really had that experience of going out into an office. I don't know what that is like, singing happy birthday to Carol, once a month kind of thing.
I don't miss it at all. It's been since 2007 and a half or so that I stopped going to an actual office. But oh my golly, I don't miss it even a tiny little bit.
Yeah. So
But it
that's
is
around the
interesting.
same time as
Go ahead.
us, like 2007 was kind of that tipping point, I think, for many people. The internet was really starting to mature and opportunities were starting to flourish in many ways.
Yeah. Janet points out that even though kids are digital natives, they still crave a personal face-to-face connection. My two kids, not true. One's very highly functioning on the autism spectrum, so he is thrilled to be behind bars. And the other one's just like socially not into it. So one thing I noticed personally in mine was that when they were schooling at home, my oldest suddenly was flourishing in school in a way that he never does in live. I don't know why. I guess it's that feeling that there's humans breathing near you, that they could come and attack you if they hate your idea.
Yeah.
Whereas at a distance, the bad side is trolls. The good side is that some people who have kind of a bellyache speaking their piece, that happens. Amber, what's the next horizon or frontier? I mean, I don't think of you as ever the kind of person who goes, well, I'm pretty comfy just staying the course. What's the next Amber Mac Studio Productions, frontier looking like for you?
Well, I haven't really talked about this publicly at all, but just because my Chris is, 10 feet away from me, and we've been chatting a little bit about me doing my own show. So I say my own show because, to be honest with you, all the shows that I've done over the years, many of them have been sponsored or introduced from another party who wanted to collaborate, which is great. And I love that. But I realized that I'm probably at the point that I would love to do my own show and have content that ranged from everything from emerging technologies. Maybe we talk a little bit about education. Maybe we talk about current affairs and other issues. I think, again, tech will always be kind of my main topic, but I think I'd like to branch out a little bit. So probably the next show will be the Amber Mac Show, which is just going to encompass a bunch of different topics. So podcast, live stream, all these different pieces. And I like the idea. I mean, I think Leo was smart early on where he had a cast of characters who made up Twit and all these great experts. I think having something like that would be really interesting as well.
How'd you come up with the name, the Amber Mac Show?
It was hard, Chris. I debated that. What's a good name for a show? And we came up with that. many days of brainstorming.
Lots of iterations. A bunch of legal pad all crushed up.
Okay, our 11-year-old named it. Fine.
See, I knew it had to be something like that. Are you gonna do cooking segments?
No, I'm not really into the lifestyle stuff as much as maybe some people. So no cooking, no fashion, no beauty, as you
no
can
makeup
probably
tutorials. Come on, I'm just trying to think of all the other stereotypes that they can put on a female.
Yeah, no, I don't. I don't want to add more complications to my day. So if I've started to really think about fashion or makeup or hair, I just don't have time to do the other stuff. And the other stuff to me is definitely a little more important.
That's where the meat is. What's your unplug self into? What do you do when you're not on?
So when I'm not on, I mean, I obviously take health and fitness pretty seriously. I think many people are in that space where I make sure that I get exercise every day, whether it's a walk with the dog or a run or whatever that might be. So when I unplug, I really miss that time to read books or magazines or listen to podcasts. So when I unplug from this kind of structure of work, I actually listen to content or read content that I think helps to develop a deep knowledge in the topics that I'm talking about from the business front. So I've been speaking about demystifying artificial intelligence for the past few years. And I know this is so lame, but if I have some downtime, I would love to read, a really in-depth book or article on that topic because I enjoy it. I'm just so curious about that. So my downtime is not very exciting or glamorous. I mean, it just helps, I think, to, cement me in this space a little bit more. So I guess I enjoy it, right? I don't know. Do you have a hobby?
Sure. No. I was going to say right back to you that none of our nerd friends do.
Like, thank God, I'm starting to sweat. That's like the worst question I've ever been asked. Because I
saw you react, and I thought, oh my gosh, I really want to let her off the hook, but I also want to hear her say something really strange, like
I know
origami. But no, it's I had a chance to address a whole bunch of Navy SEALs, and they were the way I was brought to this was they said Navy SEALs are really kind of nervous about entrepreneurship, and they're not used to being nervous, and they don't like to speak in public, and there's all this stuff they don't like. These are people who have life or death all day long, who are the kind of people that tracked down and took out Osama bin Laden, these kinds of people, and they're asking me questions about things they're scared of. And when they came to Q&A, the first thing the guy said is, "Do you ever do any skydiving?" And I said, "Not even a little bit. Like if I jump off more than 4 stairs at a time, I feel pretty damn brave." So, okay. And like all the subsequent, have you ever wrestled a shark? Have you ever put burning coals in your butt? And I'm like, no, none of these. And so I always, when we get to hobbies, I always want to make up answers.
I know it's really a hard question. And I have a very good friend who's brilliant. And she talks a lot about the world of hustle that we're in right now and how it can be very damaging and bad for your health. And I am the worst person to talk to because I don't sit down and watch movies to check out of life. I mean, when I chill out, I go onto Twitter and I read the news and I'm super interested in it. Right. So again, I think it depends, where you're at, but I think you hit on something there where you said us geeks, this is our lives. So maybe, this is just one big hobby for all of us.
Yeah, we just sit around thinking, are they really going to do away with USB-C? I finally got to plug something in without spinning the little stick 40 times.
Yeah, exactly.
Annalisa says, by the way, for your next show, you should include mental well-being in the tech world.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I mean, that's always the interesting thing to me right now is we're in this state of people actually taking wellness and mental health seriously, which is a phenomenal change over the past couple of years. And there's lots in the technology space that has enabled that for many people, whether it's apps or, you see the brain sensing headbands. Some of that technology is really interesting. So I think that's a really good idea. I mean, that's the space that I've always kind of been interested in is technology that makes our lives better, right? I don't really review much technology beyond that. I'm hoping that many of the technologies that I expose people to are technologies that do make your day easier. And I think that's what we all really want.
I have been so thrilled to catch up with you, Amber. It has been an absolute pleasure. And it has been a minute since you and I talked beyond a tweet or two. So that was really fun. It was a great chance to meet Chris and his incredible digital prowess earlier. Thank you so much for showing up. And thank you so much for being part of this today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me and great job. Your show looks awesome. I was browsing through some of the videos you've done on Facebook as well. So keep up the good work and keep us geeks proud.
That could be French or excitement. It could be either one. All right, I'm hitting the button. That means everybody get out of here. Good talking with you.
Bye.
All right, we did it. Okay, so it is transitioning.